Okay, it's Women's Month, so we continue that series. Tolulok by Aribi, okay, first African woman to lead a tertiary level education tech institution in the UK. She's also the CEO of Metropolitan School of Business and Management UK. Thank you so much for coming on the program, Tolulok. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me, Mr. Patrick.
So let's begin on the celebratory mood. Explain to us what this means. The first African woman to lead a tertiary level EdTech institution. You know, we're celebrating women, so let's begin with your own first.
Yes, okay, so essentially, we have lots of women in education, right? Funny thing is, a lot of women are primary school, secondary school. We have so many head teachers, we have so many proprietresses. But when it comes to the EdTech, it's a different ballgame entirely. And the women that are in that space as well also focus mostly on the younger levels of education, like primary and secondary. So, well, I am actually the first African, right, in the tertiary level space. That's university level, where you're looking at undergraduates, postgraduates, masters, like that, right? So, and that is a very big feat, I believe, because it's not an easy space to get into. It's seriously dominated by men and a lot of non-African men. And then, you know, the few that are also African is very, very few as well. So, yeah, so I think it's something to be very proud of. I've worked really hard to get there. It was a very long process. I always tell people that I was first a lawyer, then I moved into education, and I moved in from the really low levels to like climb my way up. So yeah, it's something to be very happy about, and I'm quite happy about that.
So let's get back to that old question, which has to be asked even tomorrow. How important or not education is from where you sit. Because some people let's talk about, I know you're in the UK, sometimes in Nigeria, I'm sure you heard some Nigerians say, or young people, I must be specific, say education is a scam. And they have their reason. They have their reason. All you have to do is to listen to them, and then you now have to perhaps convince them otherwise. So from where you sit, how important is education in achieving one's dreams?
Okay, there is something I'm always telling people. We view education as the gathering of information or getting knowledge. And that is actually the wrong way to look at education, right? Because I know that Einstein said this, but he said it in a different manner, right? He said that education is the training of the mind. I like to think of education as the training of the brain to help you to deal with issues in a different manner. And the truth of the matter is that the reason why people say education is a scam is very simple, because I've listened to both sides of the story. They say that it's a scam because they look at the amount of money it costs them to actually get educated. And by the time they spend all that money and then they start working, the ROI just doesn't meet up. And this is outside of the scam, outside of the stress rather that it involves for a lot of them. And I've also noticed that for a lot of these people, there is a lot of issues when it comes to education, because somehow it's as if the teachers are on one end trying to ensure that they learn very well. On the other end, the student feels like they're just trying to stress me out. They don't understand that I don't understand it. And when I'm trying to understand it, they fail me. So all that stress coupled with the cost of the money, coupled with when they now get to the workplace and try to earn a living, and then they're like, is it even worth it at the end of the day? I spent all this amount of money and this is where, you know, I am. But I always tell people that the reason why you think that way is because you stopped at a certain point and said, okay, this is an investment. Yes, education is an investment. Don't get me wrong. But I believe that it is more of the training of the brain. If there is no space, right? If you're trying to achieve something and you're not able to achieve that thing, then you can just move out of that space and move on to the next level and start looking for a different solution to that problem, because there's always going to be problems, right? So I tell people, don't look at education as just an investment. Look at it as the training of your brain to think and much more than think outside the box to be able to solve problems in a different manner.
Just recently, Nigeria's Minister of Education, by the way, this is something that has been said time and again, but he reiterated some data saying that about 60 million Nigerian children are poorly educated in that sense, so they can't read well, write well, and that's at the primary level. If you go to the secondary level, particularly the public schools now, you ask some students to string together a sentence or write a sentence, you find a lot of them still having issues, constructing or at least finding a way to express themselves. And that brings to the fore the issue around the language itself for education. Again, education means different things, but today education basically means Western education in that sense, because that's the process now that is global. So how can we properly localize education to fit our realities, our peculiarities? Because these pupils, all of us actually, you have to first learn the language before you now learn the education, and it's usually very tricky for them.
Okay, when you say learn the language, it's an interesting concept, because the truth of the matter is that we were colonized by the Westerners, right? So if I remember correctly, growing up in Nigeria, because I did all my education in Nigeria, I only did my master's level, postgraduate level outside of Nigeria. If I remember correctly, English was our go-to language, right? Out of English came pidgin language, pidgin English, but English was our go-to language. And if the children are not learning...
Pardon me quickly, just to put it in proper context again, when you say English was our go-to language, majority of Nigerians grow up learning their mother tongue in that sense. So it could be Yoruba, it could be Hausa, it could be Igbo,
yes.
Right? A lot of us actually grew up on learning first our mother tongue. So you learn Yoruba or what have you. Then you get into school and you have to start learning English. So that's what I mean. A lot of Nigerians started that way.
And I get that, right? But it's if you look at it in the right context, it's like you growing up in a country. Let's assume they take you to another country, maybe to France, right? And you know your mother language, because that is the language you first learned within the house. But when you go outside, what people speak more is French. And then you begin to pick the language and you begin to learn that language. And I feel like for most Nigerians, yes, I understand that that is not our mother tongue, but because we're such an interwoven community, the truth is the first language I'll probably speak, and I have more Igbo friends than Yoruba friends because I schooled in Enugu, right? My federal government college was in Enugu. I have more Igbo friends than Nigerian friends. But the first language that we speak to each other, because I'm a Yoruba woman and all of my friends are Igbos, the first language that we speak to each other was English. So if we want to localize things, we need to be able to separate the two, that, okay, there is the local language, but interestingly too, a lot of parents, they try to get their children into school at some certain ages. I'm not sure what age it is now, but I remember that when I was young, it was around 3 to 4 years old, right? By 5 years, you get into nursery, 6 years, primary 1. That was the way it was in my own time. So all the years till you're like 3, 4, you're learning your mother tongue. But when you get into school, and even before you get into school, you're already learning the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E. And I remember that even then too, based on your language, they start teaching you Yoruba. I mean, then I learned how to write in Yoruba, learn the intonations of Yoruba and the Igbo people, and some very, adventurous people. When I was in Enugu then, they actually were coming to Yoruba class. And I remember we're very few in Enugu, but they came to Yoruba class to come learn the language since they felt that they were already Igbo speakers, right? And learn how to read and write it. What I'm just trying to say is that the breakdown of this education has very little to do about the language that we're learning it in. It has more to do about the structure itself, right? The structure where we're trying to allow easy passage when it comes to what we are teaching people or how we are even teaching them, and how we're not moving with the times. So it's one of the things that I even tell people here in the UK sometimes too that we're busy teaching our children about rights, but we're not teaching them about responsibilities, right? It's the same thing. We're busy teaching them just how to, pass exams, but we're not actually teaching them how to understand what they need to do to be able to pass that exam or even use whatever they've taught them in school outside of the school. So I feel the issue is not about the language itself. I feel it's about the structure, and it has to start from the very, very foundations. How are we teaching them? What has changed essentially? What has changed? Because you and I.
Let's broaden it a little within the time we have. I know you've argued about the structure and the language. So what came to my mind to maybe put a debate over that is, look at China. Whether America likes it or not, America gets worried when they hear the word China. Because America creates one thing, in 10 minutes, China will create 10 of those things. And they are not using English. And they are not British. So we can't even call the UK or Europe something close to them, because they learned it in their own language. So if there's an opportunity to reprogram the system, reintroducing language such that we can use our languages to learn mathematics, we can use our language to learn biology, chemistry, don't you think we'll do better and learning will be more fun and more accelerated? Or it's too late right now? Because I just gave you a classic example.
Yes.
China,
Yes.
America,
Yes.
and the UK. The results are therefore to speak for itself.
Yes, and I love that particular analogy, and this is one of the things that I'm always trying to explain to us. When I'm talking to people at home and even here in the UK, this is what I'm always telling them. I said, we always talk as if Nigeria is as old as these other countries, and it pains me because whatever we are going through in Nigeria right now as a country is very similar to what every other country has gone through at some point in their life. We're not, anyway, we're just normal human beings going through a certain process. And that process, we'll go through it until a certain years ahead. Now, you mentioned India, you mentioned China. It's also the same thing in India, by the way. And even in some places in Pakistan, they actually teach them in Urdu. But one thing you have to understand is that these people have been building their language over centuries to understand how to be able to teach. And interestingly, I'm in Scotland, right? Scotland, the native language in Scotland is Gaelic. In Ireland is Gaelic. Now, Gaelic, a lot of people are still able to learn and they teach in that language in Ireland. But in Scotland, they have adopted English. And the reason is very simple, because they find out that it is easier for them to teach their children in that English, which is what people speak more here than what they used to speak in the past. So if Nigeria wants to do that, that means that we need to have a serious overhauling where some real Yoruba scholars will start trying to understand how to translate every single mathematical or physics or chemistry term into Yoruba, which will be very difficult because we didn't have that foundation in the very beginning. So it's going to be very difficult for anybody to start teaching in that language. So if we teach in that language, they're going to get to a point where we have to stop teaching in that language because we just don't even have the right words to use to explain it to students. So I think that we've crossed that bridge already. That ship has sailed a long time ago. Just the same way the Scottish people also realized that, okay, teaching in Gaelic, that ship has sailed. Let's just switch to English and be teaching people in English because that is what is generally available now. So does that mean people don't speak Gaelic in some families? Of course they do. Still some that remember, but not that much. But that does not mean we should lose our mother tongue. It just means that we will have a different language for teaching, only because we don't have the resources to get people to start trying to translate so many words in the right terms right now in Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, and you know that there's so many more languages than Yoruba, Hausa, and Igbo. Like, I'm from Ondo State, and the Yoruba that I speak, if I speak it to another Yoruba person, they will not understand me. So there is a common Yoruba that I speak. that we speak in the Yoruba land. But even that common Yoruba is not as common in some other parts that can't still speak our own common Yoruba. I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say. I think it's the same way with Igbo. And my siblings, my sister, some of my sisters married an Igbo and an Akwa Ibom person. Okay. And they speak different languages. It's not Igbo.
All right, so it's going to be an ongoing debate as far as this is concerned. But I just feel that we'll do a lot better with our language. I can imagine I learned maths or any of these technical things in my local Obolo language. I would have done way better. Tolokwe Aribi, okay, first African woman to lead a tertiary level EdTech institution in the UK, as well as the CEO of Metropolitan School of Business and Management, United Kingdom. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate the time. Thank you.
All right, we'll take a quick break now. When we come back, we'll get to know what exactly is wrong with your PC. The guy who fixes it right here on air will join us in just a moment. Join us again.